do donate. Show Joe your appreciation and help the kids out, or just buy a mug. There's plenty of mugs left on Teespring.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to get the PowerPoint up here.
You guys have like 6 mugs going with coffee. 6 of those mugs.
And slamming iced tea.
Well, they couldn't get mine to England on time, the mugs, so I'm mugless, just the T-shirt.
How unfortunate. How are you going to drink your coffee?
I know. Just in a regular old mug.
All right, let me get this pulled up. Yeah, so welcome to the show, Paul. We're going to be talking about SEO automation to increase efficiency and effectiveness, something I'm a fan of if done properly. I think we run into a lot of people who automate just to automate, and that's not necessarily the right approach to take if you're not automating stuff properly. So this should be fun to talk about, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, the floor is yours if you want to introduce yourself a little more, and then we can get going on the slideshow.
Yeah. My name's Paul Shapiro. I work at an agency called Catalyst out of Boston. It's a search and social agency focusing on mostly serving Fortune 500 clients. Been doing this SEO thing for a good number of years now. So hope to share some of that with you guys with talking some automation and get a little bit technical, but hopefully not too technical. Just technical enough that everyone can understand.
For sure. Well, should we dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Excellent. I've got my notepad ready.
All right. The floor is totally yours.
Is the deck up? I can't.
Yeah, so there's like a 10-second delay. I'll just follow you talking and keep the slides going. And
Cool.
So whenever you're ready.
Just don't see the. Oh, there they are.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just move past the slide.
Okay.
Just stay ahead of the slides because they'll always be behind you on YouTube.
Gotcha.
But the audio will sync up for the people who are actually listening on YouTube.
Okay. You already know who I am, so we could move past the bio slide.
Okay. So why automate?
Yes. Why automate? There's some obvious reasons why you would automate. I think the most obvious being that you're going to free up time, which could be best used for doing really important stuff, stuff that couldn't be automated. Another reason why you might want to consider automating is because you're freeing up time and a lot of these processes are being done by the machines, you're actually able to look at a broader set of data. So automation gives you the power and to be able to look at a larger data set. The other thing that often gets neglected in why you should be automating is when you automate things, you're doing the same thing over and over again. So it really helps you to improve the consistency and sort of create a procedure for your work. You're getting consistency out of it. So 3 reasons why you should consider automation. But what can you automate? If you're doing something on a routine basis, that's more or less indicative that it's something that can be automated. Any sort of procedures that, if you really think about them and you're able to break them down into smaller sort of micro chunks, that it's probably something that can be handled by a computer, just sort of going step by step through those different micro processes, stringing them together into something that is a larger task that ends up being automated. Furthermore, with the ability to do really easy machine learning nowadays is going to help you to do things that are normally involving more complex decision making and really enhance your ability to do things that otherwise would have been much more complicated just a few years ago. So we could talk about how do you automate? So I'm really a big fan of this tool called Mime. We use it in our work quite a bit. It's an open source tool. It can be downloaded from nime.org. And what it is really they call it like it's an analytics platform, but what it really is in a way it's a sort of a GUI for programming. I'd have to explain it as.
Okay.
There's all these different things that that are pre-built into it. It's completely open source, as I mentioned. You basically create your own computer program inside of it, which makes it really good for prototyping. I do a decent amount of like computer programming myself. I use a decent amount of Python and R in my day-to-day work, but oftentimes I start with KNIME to create prototypes for those different programs that I'm building. And I think we'll get into that in a minute just because of how extremely easy it is to use. But as I said, you just look at the next slide. There's definitely other options. This is not the end-all that be-all when it comes to automation. There's certainly other solutions out there. You could more or less just use a Python script or any other programming language of choice. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you have some sort of system in place.
Mm-hmm.
So once you sort of have a script or a program or a process that can automate it, next step is you actually have to schedule those things to be running on a recurring basis. So that's where things like cron jobs and Windows Task Manager really come into play. So you have just to explain what cron is. Cron is basically a tool built into Linux and Unix that allows you to sort of schedule programs to be run on a recurring basis. Windows has its own version called Windows Task Manager. I think that's a typo. What is it called? Windows Scheduler. If you Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's Google Windows Tasks something another. It's more or less the same thing. It's built into Windows. I'm more familiar with using cron. Just so I'll get into explaining cron. It's a shell command basically, and the way you configure it is you say cron, and there's a series of asterisks, and those asterisks represent units of time. So you have like the first asterisk represents minutes, second asterisk represents hours, followed by day of month, and day of week, and then you simply give it a command, whether that be like Python. Run this Python script, and just the example that I have in the deck is you wrote cron 001 ** Python data collector.py that will run this data collector Python script every month at midnight.
Cool.
And you could apply that to a KNIME program or anything else that you would want to run on a recurring basis. You could even do it like on Screaming Frog or something like that if you wanted. Okay. So that's a really, really helpful tool if you're doing any sort of anything on a recurring basis, as I suspect most of you are.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just go back to that program KNIME. I'm going to go through some basics of how to use the program, give you some good footing in that. So KNIME is composed out of a series of little modules called nodes, and each one of those modules represents a very, very simple task. And those tasks can be sort of strung together in the GUI and goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and so on. You string them all together, and together they do something much larger. Sort of look like that.
This kind of reminds me of I used to use something in college for like electrical circuits by Texas Instruments that was similar to this. I can't remember what it was called.
Oh yeah. I vaguely remember using a program like that too.
Yeah. I can't remember what the hell it's called. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I know exactly what you're talking about, except I don't remember the name.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of string them together into a larger workspace called the workflow. And it's really, really simple. You sort of drag one arrow from one node into the next, and they combine to do amazing things. After you string them together, you sort of have to configure them. They all have their own sort of distinct types of configurations. For instance, this one I have highlighted on the screen, the table creator node. It's very simple. It's basically a very simple spreadsheet. So you can input any sort of text into a series of cells, and the next node will do something with that. Sort of depends on what you string to it. So let's look at an application for this. I think this is sort of a simple one, keyword research. Keyword research is something that notoriously ends up sort of looking like this. If this isn't on your screen yet,
It was LabVIEW.
Was it LabVIEW?
Yeah, someone in the chat. That's what I used to use. Is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So keyword research notoriously sort of ends up looking like this at the end of the day, where you have sort of a spreadsheet. Maybe you have some more styling applied to it, but it's usually just a list of keywords, some sort of search volume, a competition metric, maybe some more, some other metrics if you're really fancy with it. And that's not necessarily the best. The other thing with keyword research is it can be extremely time intensive, especially depending on the size of your website. I had conducted a just quick survey, sort of seeing how long people are spending on keyword research on average. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like a medium-sized site, which I quantified as like 100 to 250 pages, basically. People are spending 12 to 18 hours sort of putting that together. So anything you can really do to cut down on the time of conducting keyword research, I think, is really advantageous. And especially with keyword research, this is applicable when you're not automating, you're really limiting the size of your data set, because that means that you're sort of looking through these one by one manually or semi-manually and really making decisions based on that smaller data set. You can't possibly use a larger data set because it's too time intensive. Mm-hmm. So automation allows you to look at that larger data set. So this is sort of the basic idea of how I structure a keyword research automation workflow. Sort of start with a list of seed keywords. The initial seed keywords may be something that you come up with off the top of your head. So like an initial seed list, maybe 10 keywords, maybe that's 20 keywords. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Maybe input some keyword data from Google Webmaster Tools or Search Console. Maybe pull in some competitors via SEMrush, or I get some keywords out of a SQR report if you're running a lot of AdWords campaigns. Then you sort of pipe that into things like Keyword Planner. You could do this via API, via like GrepWords, or even via the AdWords API if you have access to that. You can pull in sort of semantic keyword research recommendations. I'm a really big fan of this tool called MarketMuse. They make that very easy and they do a very good job of it. Of course, there's other alternatives. Actually, I gave a presentation in Brighton SEO in 2015 talking about semantic keyword research, and actually some of the stuff that Nick went through, a lot of stuff with like LDA and TF-IDF back then, sort of scratching the surface of that as well in that presentation. If you're really curious, I have that on my website. And then looking again at some sort of competitor metrics from SEMrush. I think SEMrush is a fantastic tool, has a wealth of information in it, and it's all super accessible via API, which is probably my favorite part of SEMrush. So you take all that data that you've just piped through, all those APIs and everything, you've got even more keyword data, even more metrics out of that, and pump that through something like the Google Autocomplete API. And then once you have this massive hundreds of thousands of keywords list, you have to do something to sort of filter that down and do some sort of data manipulation to get that list a little bit smaller. So that's what this could look like. So you look at something like organic competition. Maybe you want to get the top 10 results for each one of those keywords via an API. We use Stat at Catalyst. There's a number of other rank checking softwares. You use whatever you want. Maybe pipe that in through an API for a link metric service like Moz or Majestic, and sort of get those authority metrics about each one of those links that ranks. You can use that to sort of simulate how difficult it would be for you to rank for that keyword, and do that on an automated basis. Other tools like SEMrush and Moz obviously have their own score for this, so it's sort of whatever you want to use. Get things like search volume. I mentioned you do that via GrepWords API or SEMrush API, or even the AdWords API if you have access. you can do things really funky, like keyword trends. Something I wrote a blog post about this is if you pipe all this information through the Google Trends API, which is not an official API, but there's some scripts out there that sort of tap into this. You can look at it over a longer period of time than something like Google Keyword Planner has accessible to it. So what you could do is like say on average this year the search volume was this, and then the next year on average the search volume was that, and you can actually look at the slope of the two and do some sort of like basic projections about will this keyword grow in the next coming years or will it decrease in popularity. So you have some sort of way of ascertaining whether this is a good keyword in terms of growth or not. So string this all together into something into KNIME, sort of looks chaotic like this, not very pretty, but in the end of the day, it's going to produce some really insightful stuff.
Right.
But in the end of the day, you're still left with something that looks like that spreadsheet that I showed earlier. So the next part of automation is something that I often advocate is, what are you going to do with that data to make it more digestible? You need to visualize it. So this is just an example. In this case, I had all these keywords categorized via machine learning algorithm into distinct categories. So once everything's grouped together, you can sort of look at those metrics in a quadrant and make it really simplify it. So like in the top right quadrant of this, it's looking at organic competition by, I think that was growth, and then sized by search volume. So we know things in the top right quadrant are really good opportunities, and the bigger the bubble, the better.
Cool.
And that was something produced by, I think, ggplot in R. There's a number of other options for visualizations. Big fan of Tableau, makes things super easy, but it's super pricey. So sort of depends what you're into.
Yeah.
Do really advanced stuff. Another thing is there's tons of scripting options. So this is an example of an interactive visual that I put together using Python, actually inside of KNIME. That's something you could do with KNIME that I'm a big fan of, is sort of integrate R and Python and do some even more advanced stuff within KNIME itself. So if you want to grab that script, it's accessible via that link if you want to play around with that visualization. If you want to learn more about this particular application of automating keyword research, I did give a presentation about this at SearchLove a year or two ago, and on semantic keyword research at Brighton SEO. If you want to just really dive deep into that particular example, that is available. All right. So what else can we automate with SEO? What are other good candidates for automation? We spoke about keyword research as a candidate for doing some automation. There's certainly a number of others. I think the most obvious is reporting. If you're wasting time in Excel reporting things sort of manually, like you're really wasting time, because above all anything else, like that's something that should be done for you. And I don't care what you use. We use Tableau, or reportings tend to look something like this in Tableau, but Google Data Studio is free. Power BI is another option. There's a number of these sort of dashboarding options that really help you to produce really compelling, interactive and dynamic reports that you really don't have to do once you set it up. You do them on a recurring basis. You use something like Cron, and they're one and done. And of course, this puts the onus on you to sort of like talk to your client and say, like, what does this actually mean? But in terms of actually building the report, it's done. It's something that should be completely automated. Data collection. We're SEOs. We deal in a lot of data. So you need to collect that data. So for instance, Google Search Console, I guess prior to this new beta that everyone's getting right now, we really only had access to 90 days. So it was necessary to sort of store that data on a recurring basis. So you could look at it from the year before. And even with the new beta rolling out, and assuming that gets incorporated into the API. I still advocate doing this because you may have, 18 months now, or something like that. That's still only 18 months. If I want to look at something like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's up to you to start cataloging that data now for your clients.
Sure.
So I wrote a little Python script that'll help you dump this data into a SQL database, so you can easily access that.
Nice.
I haven't tried it with the new Search Console. I assume the new Search Console is not set up with this yet, because I sort of remember John Mueller saying that that's going to come later on. But definitely, it's something you guys need to be doing, and will help with your automation efforts later on. Also, if you don't want to use a regular SQL database, J.R. Oakes wrote a really awesome script to back everything up to BigQuery, if that's something you prefer, if you're really into the Google Cloud infrastructure. So that link's right there too.
Awesome.
Yeah. Here's another cool example of something that I did for some clients. Sort of automated 301 redirect mapping from old URLs. So this is pretty neat. Leverage the Wayback Machine API. If you've never used that, it's super sweet. You can sort of put in a domain name, and it will list historically all the URLs that it's ever captured in the Wayback Machine. So you end up, if you have a domain name that's been around forever, especially some of my clients, you put in a domain name, they totally forgot about a million things 10 years ago. You find some really golden stuff. So this actually got this idea from Patrick Stocks, and went ahead and automated it. So get all the historical data about URLs from Wayback Machine. You crawl the website concurrently. So you crawl the website, you download all those pages that have rendered from the crawl. You extract that content using something like Boilerpipe, which gets rid of all like the navigation links and really just focuses on the body content of the page. And you convert that to a bit vector. And then you go back to the Wayback Machine API. You filter out all the URLs that it found to stuff that's currently on the website. You grab the rendered page from the Wayback Machine, as we did with the crawl. You extract the main content of that, convert that to a bit vector, and then you compare the two using cosine similarity. So then you set a threshold. You say something that's highly identical. So like a score of like 1, saying it's like 100% identical, or 0.9, it's like very highly like an identical piece of content. That's something that we should be redirecting, because essentially it's an old URL. The content's highly similar. It's highly similar to a page on our existing website, and you could sort of just automate your 301 redirects that way if you're dealing with like a site migration or a series of site migrations gone awry. Just to give you some clue about how this would work in KNIME has a lot of this stuff built in. I know this sounds sort of crazy when you're talking about like bit vectors and cosine similarity, but if you're using KNIME, a lot of this is just like built-in nodes that you can leverage. You don't have to go crazy trying to figure this out, like using like natural language processing libraries in Python or anything. There's like a document vector node. There's a similarity search will handle the cosine similarity, and for some of the API stuff, there's like a get request node. So it makes it really easy to do some of these really more complicated things that I'm talking about. SERP similarity and overlap. This was another thing that I had automated. Sort of interesting. So what I did was I downloaded all the ranking data via an API. We were using stat again, and I compared the results from everything ranking in position 1 and 10 for each query against every other query of results ranking from 1 to 10. And then we just very simple. We calculate the similarity between the two. And then what you can do is you can schedule recurring checks. So what you end up doing is you say, well, if this SERP ends up becoming more similar to this SERP, maybe the search engines are recognizing this as a very similar search. And then one, it's not necessary to create new content because the search engines are basically viewing these as a very similar query. Two, you can also use that to sort of understand how things have changed over time. All right. Other things, sort of like testing JavaScript rendering. This is sort of fun. So this is using the new Puppeteer library that Google's been pretty bullish about. That's a library to help you using headless Chrome. And what this will do is it will crawl your website using Puppeteer. And then you can use that to sort of extract different things if you're using a very JavaScript-heavy website, maybe using a modern JavaScript framework like React or Vue or Angular, and sort of making sure that it's able to be crawled properly by Googlebot. Taking that a step further, you can perform testing with Lighthouse on an automated basis as well. So here's a Node.js script that it basically crawls the website. Actually, this one takes a list of URLs, so you have to pre-crawl it. But you put in the list of URLs, and it will get all the sort of Lighthouse performance metrics for you. So like for first meaningful paint, first interactive, all those sort of interesting new site performance metrics that Google's been evangelizing lately. I think are a little bit more insightful than like Google Page Speed Insights or something like that.
Sure.
Anomaly detection. You could sort of automate anomaly detection. This is something I wrote an article on Search Engine Land about this. If you want to read further about it, but the basic idea is we collect ranking data via the Search Console API, and what we're doing is basically we're looking at a query, so a keyword to landing page level for rank. So we look at everything that's ranking in position 1. What is the click-through rate? Like, what's the average click-through rate for that? And then on a query by query level, we look at how much that click-through rate differs from that average. And this gets kind of granular. It goes close. So once we calculate that, we can sort of look for outliers. And when we get an outlier, when that's identified, we send an email to our SEO guys. So like all of a sudden I have a sneaker website and my landing page for Nike sneakers, although it's ranking in position 2, our click-through rate is much worse than our other keywords ranking in position 2. So that's something you need to investigate. That could be like a number of things, whether it be, all of a sudden Google's, got a new knowledge graph in there, or there's a new featured snippet that might be detracting from the normal click-through rate, or it could be there's a new competitor in there, or it could be that your title tags or your meta descriptions really suck and you need to update your copy. But just so you're aware of it, there's these bases, just these tests happening on a recurring basis, and you're going to get a notification when one of those things doesn't line up.
Cool.
Content ideas. Just because content creation is sort of a creative process by nature doesn't mean that you can't leverage automation to help with that. So one of the things that I'm a big fan of is mining social news sources, something like Reddit. So I wrote a little Python script for mining data from Reddit. And this is pretty cool. What it basically does is you put in a keyword or list of keywords, and it'll look at either all of Reddit, or if you want to isolate it to specific subreddits, and it'll pull in all the top performing posts. So you sort of can look at, well, this topic on Reddit did really well. It got X number of votes, got X number, Y number of comments. This is really indicative of something that maybe I should be considering including content about on my website. And you could do that on a recurring basis, and you can automate that and say, well, send notifications to me when something really significant is being discussed on Reddit, and is really a hot topic and something that I need to identify as something to write about. So you could use that to sort of come up with new ideas, or if you just want to use it as a data mining thing on a one-off basis, that's fine as well.
Nice.
Things like validation though too. For instance, I've been using the AMP validation. If any of you guys are running AMP on your website, Search Console does this to some extent, but it's also really, really slow. You're not getting those AMP validations real time. So I think it's something that you should sure take it on your own to do. So here's it's a Python script that uses something called AMP bench to validate all the pages. So to do this, you just need to feed it a list of URLs that has AMP, and it'll give you all sorts of validation. Beyond just like the basic, is this AMP valid or not? It gives you all sorts of other information as well, and you can schedule that with cron rather, and have that email you out if something changes. And this is not limited to these sort of things. You can also do link building, which is often something we think about as doing manual outreach is not something you would normally. Well, I guess people automate quite a bit. So, but if maybe prospecting is a good example. So I like to do this for prospecting. So like using something like the Ahrefs API, the Majestic API, we could sort of just leverage that to as something we schedule to give you new information. So you put in your competitors, and on a recurring basis, send me notifications about links they built, and whether there's something that I should be addressing in conducting outreach, and getting those similar type links myself. And just APIs are relatively easy to use. They sound kind of techy, but they're not. Oftentimes, it's just like a URL and like a keyword appended to that URL. And then you just have like a program that reads the output, and sometimes it's like a CSV, or more commonly nowadays is like a JSON output, which is sort of like a modern CSV. It sounds more technical than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely leverage those APIs when you're automating things. And just to sort of finish this up, there's tons of other tech audit related things that I like to automate as well. Just sort of detection of things like, is the website being crawled and producing new 404 errors? Are we getting new redirects? Are there any changes occurring to your robots.txt file? I run into this stuff all the time, especially just on the agency side and having a ton of clients that are constantly moving their sites around. So sort of anything that's changing, just making sure you guys are getting notices about that. That's something very, very simple to automate. You just do these checks like once a day or whatever it is you're doing. And you don't even have to build this yourself. You can use things like Deep Crawl, software that already exists. But just as long as you're doing this on a recurring basis and it's not something that you're manually doing, you're not manually every day going into Screaming Frog and producing a crawl, or you're not doing that at all. You're not checking enough because it's too onerous to do that manually. So definitely start thinking about automating some of the stuff you're doing with SEO. It's an invaluable time saver, and you're going to get better results at the end of the day.
For sure. That was really cool. I've never even thought about automating stuff in that fashion. That's pretty cool.
Thanks.
Steve, are you coming back on the line? Or what are you doing here? Guess not.
He's sleeping.
Oh, he better not be. I don't know. I guess that kind of wraps up your deck, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess we can open it up to Q&A if anybody has any questions. How about Steve? Did you write anything down? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was turned off on the laptop as well while I was taking notes.
Oh.
Is my picture up on screen?
Yeah.
Am I back at all? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main takeaways for me were like, I didn't know you could use the Wayback Machine API like that. That's pretty cool just by itself. Because I think a lot of us, you go into like the backlink tools, the way we've always done it's like you look on Ahrefs and see if there's that it's identifying. But obviously, you're going to get so much more historic data on Ahrefs, so that was pretty cool. I wish I'd done more of this kind of stuff now. Like, we never did automated reporting. We always were mashing around with, we do the link building stuff. That's really cool. I would strongly recommend for anyone who's doing outreach. It's so much better with the Ahrefs API in a database, and you can query all kinds of weird stuff that Ahrefs, well, any of the data tools, because you can drag it all in there. They don't let you do some particularly weird queries you might want to do. Being able to pull all that together is super cool. So I just wanted to thank Paul for coming on. I think there's so much in that presentation. I was kind of struggling just to scribble down the main themes, let alone soak up all the depth. But obviously, get over to Search Wilderness and grab that Reddit Python code and the various other resources that Paul shared. We've got a Jake Bohal asking, I'm not sure if it's a question or just a comment, can also use to identify potential link outreach prospects. I guess it's just a side point.
Yeah. I mean, anything that you would use with the UI, you could probably do via the API, and definitely look at new prospects and beyond. I mean, it's anything you could do with the UI, you could do it just in a more succinct, automated fashion. So it's start thinking about anything you're sort of clicking around in the UI and doing too much of, and start thinking about how you can sort of start doing that with the API. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started off just doing like really simple Python scripts to, when we were previously messing around in Excel, and I'm about 8 years behind Paul, judging by this half-hour presentation. So.
And we were just talking about Fiverr in the last presentation a little bit, or just the Q&A.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not into doing this, I'm sure there's people on Fiverr that'll help you out with it. But also anything that you're sort of going back to Fiverr, or you're using a freelancer for that you're doing on a recurring basis, think about maybe automating it, and then you don't have to keep going back to that freelancer, right?
And even if you've got a VA for 20 hours a week or something, and they're doing stuff that you could have automated first, you can increase the power of that 20 hours by giving them the end data to work with, instead of having them just spend the 20 hours getting the data ready every week like a robot.
Right. I mean, we all have things that we're like, oh, I could do this in my sleep. I'm just like clicking around in Excel, and it's, what's the point, right? Because the chances are, if you're doing something like that, it's really something that you should have the computer doing for you already.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We don't seem to have too many questions, unless I missed some during the presentation. Doesn't.
Cool.
I guess that means everyone understood it all so well that there's no there's no confusion this time on the presentation. So I mean, what got you into automating stuff? Like, what was your kind of first things you started eliminating from your day-to-day work?
First thing was reporting. I think my first agency job, it was my first job. That was just this one grueling task that I had to do over and over again, and it was sitting in Excel and pulling data out of Google Analytics and pulling it out of this data source or Omniture, and just sort of like mashing things together and spending a long time just sort of making different charts in Excel. And I was like, this is absurd. Like, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And obviously you can write a VBA script that would do this for me. And that's what I did. Of course, we've come a long way since just the VBA script sort of approach. But I mean, that's definitely the first thing, especially if you're an agency, start thinking about automating your reporting. It's sort of a no-brainer.
Yeah, we need to go further with that for hours. Like the system does some of it, but I need to make it do more of the stuff that my team needs to save time. So it's a bit of an eye opener how much more you automate than us. So we need to up our game. Got a question from Jake Bohol. When setting up to track and determine averages from Google Search Console data, how do you determine differences in average between topics? For example, determining user intent for keywords in position 2 versus other keywords in position 2. Do you automate that portion, or do they always pop up for manual review?
I don't have it set up to look at that sort of granularity. I mean, that's something great if you have the time to sort of categorize keywords, or if you have a system that'll do it. But generally, I find because this sort of statistically really looks at true outliers, that you're not getting that many results on a month-to-month basis. Maybe you're getting 3 to 5 keywords on a monthly basis popping up in your email, and you're going to eyeball whether that's something to be really concerned about or not much quicker than you're going to take the time to sort of automate the categorization of like intent on those keywords. I mean, that's actually a good point. You could automate many things, but you also shouldn't take the time to automate things that you're going to do quicker, just like eyeballing.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Hopefully Jake will let us know if he needs some more depth. Any other questions coming? Guess not. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I guess one I had was I guess you, like me, use a lot of Python. Do you think that's going to continue to be the best thing for people to kind of pick up first if they're looking to automate some stuff these days, or do you see other languages becoming more prominent?
Look, Python's a very strong language, especially if you're doing any work with data. It's got a strong foothold in sort of the data science world. A lot of people are using it for data analysis. And as a result, that's very transferable to the SEO world because we're doing a lot of analytics work and we're working with a lot of data ourselves. So there's going to continue to be development there. So it's a very good option. It's not the only language. You can certainly use, I think most languages have sort of similar capabilities. I think R is another good option just because it's very data centric. I think more and more you're seeing JavaScript becoming this huge language that people are using for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, definitely consider JavaScript as a language as well.
Yeah, I saw.
But at the end of the day, programming languages are they're more or less the same. Some of them, there's some nuances there, but this type of work, it's not going to make a huge difference. You use what you're comfortable using that can handle what you're doing and that you're familiar with. That's going to go a lot longer than fixating on like using any one specific programming language versus the other.
Yeah, I guess you just, I mean, the reason I was asking just for people is you want to kind of stay where the development of the libraries that you're going to need is being done. Like obviously Python at the minute has a lot of machine learning type stuff and all that, and so it's a good place to be.
Did you ever do anything in Ruby or Rails?
I did in college. I sort of actually used more Ruby than Ruby on Rails. Believe it or not. So I think Ruby on Rails was sort of just taking off then. And I made a series of like Ruby scripts to help with some research that I was doing in college. And then I used Ruby on Rails and sort of converted that to like a web interface. But that was sort of like the end of it, I think, back in college.
Yeah, it was disappointing how Rails and Ruby together took off and then have completely like died out.
I don't think it's completely died out. It's really strong.
It's on the way.
It's not the thing anymore.
Yeah,
right?
It's on the way. Well, I mean, a lot of the Ruby guys that were originally involved in developing Rails moved on to like Erlang and Elixir and stuff like that, didn't they? They kind of forked and that'll, you divide the community, you always lose some scale, don't you? I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Patrick
always been a. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Patrick Stocks just wants to know what's something you want to or try to automate but failed.
Mm. So something that I often try to tackle is sort of keyword categorization. We have our own system in place right now, and it's like okay, but that's gone through many iterations. Many of those have been failures. Some of them not as good as others, and something that I'd like to keep enhancing. Those sort of keyword categorization techniques are never 100% perfect. So not 100% failure, but something that I'm not content with where it is, and I would like to iterate on and improve.
Cool. I think that answers that one. Anything from you, Garrett?
I can't think of anything, but my brain's not working.
Yeah, it's amazing how just presentation after presentation. It's
it's a lot to take in.
It's like
how many hours we have left?
Most of it.
All of them?
9 minus 24. What's that? 15? Or no, we're coming up on 14 to go, right?
14 to go. Yeah, 14 to go.
Normally, I wouldn't care. 24 hours for me isn't a big deal, but it's like, of course, last night I got 2 hours of sleep, and then the night before the baby kept waking up, so it was like 3 hours of sleep. So now it's just like starting to feel it.
Yeah, I've made the mistake of taking notes and paying attention to the presentations, which is more tiring than just sitting here for 24 hours.
Aren't they being recorded?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, we're going to the 24 hours just as it is going to be fully up on YouTube, and then we're going to break it up into the individual just highlights. So just the main presentations plus the best of the Q&A and stuff. Cut out the kind of filler at either side and stuff, and give people the highlights of everyone's presentations. Send out the slide decks from any of the speakers that give permission, so on and so forth.
Cool.
All right. Anybody out there have any other questions?
Yeah, you've only got a couple of minutes, and then you'll have to wait.
Patrick said, or did you already answer the categorization?
Oh, yeah, he's asked for more detail on categorization, like by relatedness, topic, intent, or something else.
I've looked into both and have worked on both, on intent and sort of topically grouping them together. Patrick, we could chat offline.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm starting to feel like a lazy host because I just can't, like, the brain's not firing and keeping things going.
Yeah, I guess this presentation left me with more things I want to go and play with now than questions, which is good. But I have to sit here instead and do more presentations.
That nine thing looks cool.
So I think this one was really actionable for everyone. I think definitely one, if you didn't get some good notes the first time, when the replay comes out, go through it again, because there's loads of stuff you can give a try to, I think, and especially since Paul's been giving away some code as well on search wilderness, so nice starting point for some of the projects.
Mm-hmm.
How's the just giving page going?
Better check in here.
Yeah,
I think we had one donation during your speech.
Oh, excellent. We're up to 4,032. Don't forget, everyone, you can buy mugs, t-shirts, various other bits and pieces as well on Teespring if you want to grab some of those.
Yeah, thank you for the donation, Michael Kuznetsov. Another name I can't say.
If you're going to be grabbing all that free stuff from Search Wilderness and checking out some automation and saving yourself a $1,000 worth of freelancers' time a month, maybe you could just give a little bit to the charity. That would be super appreciated. Remember, all these guys and girls are giving up their time for free to support St. Jude's. So whatever you can give, even if it's just a couple of dollars, is hugely appreciated.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And you'll all be bored with me saying that by the end, but if if we didn't say it, everyone's just giving up their time for free for nothing. So.
Oh yeah.
What's the most fun thing you've got planned, automation-wise, coming up that you haven't finished yet?
It's usually some sort of like new report, which I don't want to get too into the weeds about, but have some new, like, sort of not like reports in terms of like the reports I was talking about earlier, but things to give you new insights and to sort of leverage to do more things that you wouldn't already think about doing from your basic reports. Do quite a bit of that. It's like insights-based systems.
Cool.
Potentially vague.
Well,
You can fill us in on those in next year's 24 hours of SEO.
right on. Well, were there any more questions? Nope. Well, all right. Thanks for coming on, man. That was super cool to listen to.
Yeah,
Appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed that one.
I saw some people asking questions about slides and stuff. Just make sure you register at the 24hoursSEO.com once everything's over. It'll probably be a couple days before we get everything broken up, but all the slides will be out. The speeches will be broken up into hour slots, so it'll be easy to digest. And thanks again, Paul, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Yeah,
You
thanks
too,
for
man.
joining us, Paul.